Has the Bible been changed? Some people say we can't trust the New Testament because we only have copies of the original documents. The original New Testament documents have been lost, and we have no idea how much these copies have been altered or edited in the past 2,000 years. So we can't know what the New Testament originally said. Here's my response to this kind of argument. If it were true, then we could never know what any ancient document said because we don't have the original copies of any ancient work. We don't have the original Iliad. We don't have the original histories of Herodotus. All we have are manuscript copies like these, which are ancient manuscripts of the New Testament. But we can determine what ancient documents originally said with the science of textual criticism. So this is a map of the ancient Roman Empire in the 2nd century when Christians were making copies of New Testament documents. And so what we do is that we find these documents scattered throughout the ancient world, and we can compare them to one another to determine what the original said. You can do this for biblical works, and it's done for non-biblical works. We compare these manuscript copies to find out what the original said. And so what we can do is compare how many manuscripts do we have for the New Testament versus manuscripts we have for other ancient non-biblical works. If we trust that those ancient non-biblical works have been reliably transmitted to us, and we have better evidence for the New Testament, then we should trust that the New Testament has been reliably transmitted to us. So this is a table from an article by Clay Jones in the Christian Research Journal. I'll link to it in the description of the video because sometimes when people talk about manuscripts, they use outdated numbers because we've discovered more biblical and non-biblical ancient manuscripts. So Jones shows that with Homer's Iliad, we now have 1,757 ancient manuscript copies, probably one of the best attested non-biblical works in the ancient world. For Herodotus's histories, people used to say there were only 8 copies. Now there's about 109. But when we compare that to the New Testament, we have 5,795, at least by Jones's counting in 2013. We have almost 6,000 ancient Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. And we have thousands more in other languages like Slavonic, Coptic, Latin. So we have far more manuscripts for the New Testament, and that helps us to see we have a large number to cross-reference and check and find out what the original said. Since we have more than other ancient works that we believe are reliably transmitted, we should believe the New Testament has been reliably transmitted as well. Take, for example, the Greek poet Homer. The first fragments of his work, the Iliad, were discovered 400 years after its composition. And the first complete copy of the Iliad in a manuscript called Venetus A, it was written in the 10th century AD, over 1,000 years later. Yet we usually say, well, we basically have the same Iliad that Homer wrote. Then compare that, though, to the New Testament. The first fragment of the New Testament is not written 400 years later. It's written 40 years later. It's this fragment right here, P52. I think it's the Riles Papyrus 52. And so that's the first fragment, is just not 400 years later, it's 40 years later. And the first complete copy of the New Testament is not over 1,000 years later, it's 300 years later in Codex Sinaiticus, which was discovered at St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai. So I hope this is helpful for you all to see that the New Testament has been reliably transmitted to us, and we can trust that we have essentially what was originally penned by the biblical authors. And so if you guys like videos like this and find them edifying, consider going to trenthornpodcast.com, become a supporter there so we can make more videos like this and podcasts to help build up people's knowledge and understanding of the Christian faith and be able to share it with others. So thank you very much.